Aliens checked a human girl's bag and panicked when they saw the uniform hidden inside. The air of Nexus Station felt like a damp towel wrapped around Sarah Morgan's skin as she pushed through the market district. The massive structure floated in orbit around a neutral world on the edge of map space, serving as a crossroads for traders from almost every corner of the Galactic Concord. 17 different species hustled and bargained beneath flickering holo-signs and shifting light panels. Hit that subscribe button and tap the bell icon so you never miss our latest uploads. Humans were still the new kids in the room. Only 12 years had passed since Earth had been admitted to the Concord, and most of the station's permanent residents still treated them as curiosities at best, outdated primitives at worst. Sarah hugged her beaten duffel close, weaving between a pair of towering willow-wand vendors whose translucent, glowing skin washed the walkway in soft blue. On her other side, heavy-footed Drorans lumbered past, their plated hides clacking against armor harnesses with each step. The air carried sharp spices, ozone from shielded equipment, an unfamiliar scent she didn't have words for. Her wrist display flashed a warning about the time. "I'm going to be late," she muttered. 6 months on Nexus, and this was the first steady job she'd gotten. A maintenance tech contract with a mid-range freight company. No glory, no command, no medals, just wages of bunk and food. That was all she wanted. No more whispers of, "Is that Captain Morgan's sister?" Up ahead, a cluster of insectoid Venturi had set up an impromptu auction, their chittering voices overlapping as they displayed crates of shimmering crystals to a small crowd. The bottleneck forced pedestrians into a narrow gap around them. Sarah sighed and started sidestepping through the congestion, trying not to elbow anyone with spines, horns, or extra limbs. She never noticed the 3 figures half hidden in a recessed doorway, watching her pass. Croins. They were relatively new to the Concord themselves, admitted only 2 decades before humans. Built for battle, with dense gray-green skin and ridged jaws full of needle-like teeth, their species had a reputation for aggressive honor culture and a habit of punching down on anyone they viewed as lesser. "Look at that one," said the tallest of the trio in their native tongue, the translator beads in his ear flashing. Decorative scar patterns climbed his neck and scalp. Another human pretending this place belongs to her. The broad-shouldered one beside him snorted, idly scratching the bony ridges above his eyes. They all walk around with that same stunned expression, like children who wandered onto a warship. "The human is alone," observed the youngest, his markings still incomplete, his scar line shallow, and heading toward the service levels. The tall Croin's lips peeled back in a predatory approximation of a smile. "Then we will provide education. It is important for newcomers to grasp the true hierarchy." They slipped into the moving crowd, keeping just far enough back that Sarah didn't notice. They watched her pause at a stall, buy a cheap portable snack, then continue toward a quieter corridor leading to the maintenance lifts. Sarah heard footsteps behind her, but paid them no mind until the rhythm changed. Heavier, more deliberate. Instinct tightened the muscles along her spine. Stories traveled fast on Nexus. Croin games with humans, shoving matches that became beatings, mock interrogations that turned cruel. She increased her pace. The corridor up ahead was nearly empty. The service lift doors a distant rectangle of dull metal. "Human," a rough voice called, the sound rolling oddly through the translator. "Wait." She pretended not to hear and walked faster. "I said wait." A heavy hand clamped on her shoulder and spun her around. Sarah stumbled, finding herself blocked by 3 Croins, each larger than she was by half. The one gripping her, the scar-marked leader, leaned down so she could smell the metallic tang of his breath. "Where were you rushing off to, little human?" "We only wish to talk." "I'm late for work," Sarah said, trying to keep her voice level as she pulled at her shoulder. His grip didn't budge. "Please let me go." The youngest Croin stepped closer, head tilted. "Work? What job could a human possibly do here?" His tone dripped derision. "Scrub out waste units? Even the cleaning drones outperform your kind." "I'm a maintenance technician," she replied. "And yes, my supervisor is waiting." The broad one barked a laugh. "A human technician? Your species is still struggling with basic artificial gravity, and you think you can service Concord systems? Sarah's jaw tightened. I don't want trouble. Nor do we. The leader crooned, feigning reasonableness. We are simply curious. You are new to the stars. Fragile. Unproven. We wish to understand what such a primitive brings to Nexus Station. His hand slid from her shoulder to her duffel strap. What is a barely space-worthy human carrying that is so precious? He asked. Show us. She stepped back, clinging to the bag. That's my property. The Concord encourages cultural exchange, the youngest said brightly, moving behind her to block any retreat. Consider this education. Before she could brace, the leader yanked the duffel from her hands. When she lunged after it, the broad groin shoved her back into the wall. Metal slammed into her shoulder blades and knocked the air from her lungs. Let's see what prizes humanity hides, the leader said, unzipping the bag with relish. He pulled out items one by one. A dinted water flask, a compact tool kit, vacuum-sealed ration packs, spare coveralls. He tossed each piece to the floor, where the others prodded them with bored contempt. Nothing, the broad one grunted, kicking her tools aside. No advanced tech. Not even decent weapons. Sarah watched her few possessions scatter, heat rising under her skin, not just from fear, but from humiliation. She'd dealt with bullies before, but here every insult was sharpened by species prejudice. The leader reached deep into the bag and pulled out something folded tight. Dark blue cloth unfolded in his hands as he shook it loose, a uniform, neatly preserved. The corridor seemed to exhale. All three croins froze. The mocking lines of their faces hardened, then drained of color. The leader's pupils contracted as his gaze locked on the emblem stitched over the left breast. A stylized earth encircled by olive branches, a sword set behind a globe. Every citizen of the Concord knew that symbol now. Earth Defense Corps, the human elite military force that had turned the tables on what was supposed to be a straightforward croin incursion into human space 3 standard years earlier. The fleet that had taken obsolete ships and outmaneuvered croin battle groups with terrifying creativity. The Corps that had turned primitive humans into something the Concord strategists now took very seriously. The leader swallowed, his throat plates flexing. You serve in the Earth Defense Corps? His voice had lost all amusement. Sarah didn't answer. She simply watched them and noticed the same thing she'd learned to read in bar fights back on Earth, when predators realized they'd chosen the wrong target. The three croins had unconsciously backed up half a step, their shoulders adjusted, feet shifting, hands hovering just shy of their belts. Their whole posture screamed wary, nervous. They believed she wore that uniform. Pick up my things, Sarah said quietly. The youngest tried to recover his sneer. We did not know. Pick up my things. Her tone cut through his protest like a blade. They exchanged glances, then hastily crouched and began gathering her belongings, returning each item to the duffel with a strange, stiff care. No more kicking. No more wisecracks. The leader folded the uniform carefully and eased it on top before closing the bag. He extended it to her without quite meeting her eyes. Sarah took it and checked inside, fingers brushing the familiar fabric of the uniform. The next time you think about cornering someone because you assume they're beneath you, she said, looking from one croin to the other, remember this moment. That feeling right now, the sudden certainty that you've made a very stupid mistake. She slung the duffel over her shoulder and headed toward the lift. The three croins moved aside immediately, not daring to touch her again. Inside the lift, with the doors sealed and the hum of machinery all around, Sarah finally let herself sag against the wall. Her knees trembled with the adrenaline crash. She eased the zipper open just enough to slide a hand inside and press her palm over the embroidered EDC emblem. The uniform felt cool under her fingers. It wasn't hers. It had belonged to Captain Emily Morgan, commanding officer of the EDS Indomitable, the Earth Defense Corps vessel that had rammed and destroyed a Croin flagship at Proxima Centauri, breaking the spine of the invasion and changing humanity's place in the galaxy. Emily Morgan, Sarah's older sister, dead for 3 years. The uniform was the only real piece of Emily she had left. a relic she'd carried to the far edge of space like a talisman. She had never imagined it would shield her like this. The lift chimed, and the doors hissed open onto the narrow corridor leading to Technical Manager Corbin's office. Sarah squared her shoulders and forced her breathing to steady. The door slid aside with a pneumatic sigh. "You're late, Morgan," said the man behind the desk without looking up. Corbin was Tehran, humanoid, but with skin like polished copper and eyes that reflected light like mirrors. As chief of maintenance for Stellar Freight's Nexus operations, he was infamous for being precise, unsentimental, and allergic to excuses. "I apologize, sir," Sarah said, standing just inside the doorway. "There was an incident on the way here." Corbin's mirrored eyes flicked up and scanned her in a heartbeat. "You appear intact. Was this incident of sufficient severity to justify tardiness on your first day?" "I was stopped by 3 Croins," she said, deciding not to sugarcoat it. "They consider my belongings a public exhibit. That got his full attention." He leaned back slightly. "Croins, and yet you are uninjured. That is not typical." "They found my sister's Earth Defense Corps uniform in my bag," Sarah replied. They changed their minds. Understanding clicked across his metallic features. "Ah, the famous Corps. Your people caused quite a stir with that affair in Proxima human space." He paused, studying her more carefully. "Your sister served?" "Yes, sir. Captain Emily Morgan." She commanded the Indomitable. Recognition flared in his mirrored eyes. "The vessel that sacrificed itself to take the Croin flagship with it," he said. "A decisive tactical move." Sarah's throat tightened. "Yes. I did not connect your surname when I approved your file," Corbin said. "Morgan is common among humans." "It's better that way," she answered automatically. "And yet you chose maintenance work instead of following her path." His tone wasn't mocking, simply curious. "I'm better with systems than with weapons," Sarah said. "I fix things. That's where I'm useful." Corbin accepted this with a small nod. "Your certification supported my decision to hire you. We do not care about your bloodline, only your competence." He tapped a series of commands on his console. "Your first assignment is on level 42, section C. A gravity regulator is malfunctioning near one of our storage bays. Restore stability." He pinged the work order to her wrist display along with a map overlay. "Active gravity is generally considered important in a station constructed entirely in space," he added dryly, "especially when one is storing volatile cargo. Do not disappoint me, Morgan." "I won't, sir." As she turned to leave, he spoke again. "Morgan." She looked back. "That uniform you carry," Corbin said. "Be cautious with it. Symbols can move people in ways logic cannot predict. Some will fear it. Some will envy it. Some will hate it. All of them will notice it." Sarah thought of the Croins' faces, the way the color had drained from their skin. "Understood," she said. "I'll remember." She stepped back into the corridor and headed toward the nearest service ladder, duffel thumping lightly against her hip. Somewhere above her, Nexus Station hummed and shuddered. An artificial world hung in vacuum. Emily had fought for humanity with torpedoes and maneuvering thrusters. Sarah would fight with tools, diagnostics, and stubbornness. Both were battles. She just hoped hers would be quieter. The gravity regulator on level 42 was one of the standard Concord models, more advanced than anything Earth had designed alone, but built on principles Sarah understood. The storage bay itself looked like someone had tipped reality and forgotten to straighten it again. Freight containers leaned at skewed angles. A few smaller crates floated lazily, tether lines straining as pockets of low gravity pulsed through the room. Warning tags blinked angrily on half a dozen cargo locks. Sarah set her duffel by the access panel and brought up the diagnostic interface. The field readings bounced in uneven spikes. "Field strength fluctuations, classic coil fatigue," she murmured, fingers moving over the controls. "But something's pushing it harder than normal." She opened the side panel with a hiss of released pressure. The metallic smell of stressed components leaked out, sharp and unpleasant. One of the emitter coils was cracked along its edge, hairline fractures spiderwebbing under the casing. "Found you," she muttered. "You knew." The deep voice made her flinch. Sarah jerked her head up. A Drayron stood framed in the doorway. nearly as tall as the opening itself. Coppery scales overlapped across his massive body, dull in the station lighting. Heavy brow ridges shadowed his eyes, which watched her with the relaxed focus of a soldier at rest. "First day," Sarah said, turning back to the panel so he wouldn't see the last of her surprise. "Corbin sent a human," the Draerin rumbled. There was no insult in it, only mild curiosity. "He sent the best qualified tech available," she said, carefully easing the broken coil free. Species wasn't part of the system requirements. For a heartbeat, there was silence. Then the Draerin made a low, vibrating sound she suspected was amusement. "Direct," he said. "I like that. I am Thra, Chief of Security for Stellar Freight on this level. Sarah Morgan, Maintenance." He stepped inside, keeping a respectful distance from the open panel, scanning the tilted cargo stacks without appearing worried. "You've located the failure point quickly," Thra noted. "Part of it," she replied, holding up the cracked coil. "This explains the wild gravity. What it doesn't explain is why the coil failed early. These units are rated for decades." She moved to the wall console and pulled up a 3D map of the bay and its surroundings. Light lines trace power conduits, structural supports, and system placements. Something lit up too close to her regulator. "There," Sarah said, zooming in. "Who thought it was smart to install a magnetic containment unit right next to a gravity regulator?" Thra leaned forward to study the schematic. "That unit arrived last week. Some special cargo from a Venturi merchant. Our operations manager, who is also Venturi, assigned it here." "Of course he did," Sarah muttered. "Venturi family discount." She tapped readings from both systems. The magnetic containment field is interfering with the gravity harmonics. The regulator's been compensating non-stop, overworking the coil until it cracked. Fixing the coil without moving that thing is like patching a hull breach while someone keeps drilling holes. Thra's scales tightened along his jawline. Most new techs would replace the fail part and log the rest as beyond scope. "I hate repeat calls," Sarah said briskly. "And I hate preventable explosions even more. I'll install a new coil and retune the field to tolerate the interference for a couple of days. But if that containment unit stays parked here, you'll be calling me back when the next coil pops." The Draerin rumbled again. "I will have a conversation with operations." He watched silently while she slid in the replacement coil, reattached connections, and began recalibrating the system. Her hands moved with quick, practiced efficiency. "You adjust as if you designed these regulators yourself," Thra observed. "Study them on Earth," she said. "We couldn't afford our own, so we took apart every schematic we could pry out of Concord databases." She tweaked the field frequencies, watching the gravity readings smooth out. The floating crates settled back toward their anchors. "That should hold for 48 hours, she said, closing the panel. "Maybe longer if no one decides to park more experimental toys next to it." "Acceptable," Thra said. He moved toward the door, then paused. "Most humans I've met here either overcompensate or shrink into the background. You don't seem to do either." "I'll just fix what's broken," Sarah replied, picking up her duffel. "Everything else is someone else's department." He inclined his head. "A practical philosophy, Morgan." Over the next weeks, that philosophy became her rhythm. Every cycle began in Corbin's office. He would assign her a slate of work orders ranging from mundane filters and misaligned doors to erratic reactors on auxiliary generators, glitching life support sensors, and mismatched alien tech kludged together by whoever had wanted to save credits at the time. Nexus was old in space station terms. Systems had been added, removed, repurposed, and jury-rigged through multiple administrations. Stellar Freight's corner of it was no different. A patchwork of Terran engineering, Draerin force fields, Venturi cargo systems, and human improvisations. Sarah thrived. She crawled through ducts barely wider than her shoulders, memorized the feel of each maintenance tunnel, and built a mental map of which circuits lied on which schematics. If she didn't recognize a system, she researched it on her off hours, pulling up Concord manuals and annotated diagrams. Her reputation spread quickly. Corbin started sending her the tickets labeled multiple prior attempts or unknown root cause. She took them all and solved them. Colleagues grumbled at first about the human, getting the interesting work, but grumbling turned into grudging respect when her fixes stayed fixed. Station crews began greeting her with nods instead of suspicious stares. Some aliens who were used to being ignored seemed unsure how to react when she spoke to them with the same crisp professionalism she used on higher-ranking staff. Not everyone liked her style. More status-obsessed species found her lack of deference unsettling. She didn't bow, didn't grovel, didn't pretend to be impressed by elaborate titles. She cared only whether someone knew their systems and whether they did their job. She noticed the tension, but she didn't adjust for it. She hadn't come to Nexus to become a diplomat. She was here to build something that belonged to her, away from the ghost of a sister who had died a hero. Then everything changed in a single, urgent call. Sarah was elbow-deep in a secondary environmental array on level 28, replacing a cluster of power couplings that had been patched 3 too many times, when her comm pinged with a high-priority alert from Corbin. "Morgan," his clipped voice came through. "Report to docking Bay 17 immediately. Bring your tools." "On my way," she said, sealing the open panel and logging the interruption. When Corbin used that tone, it wasn't for a stuck door. Docking Bay 17 was chaos. A stellar freight cargo ship hung in its cradle, lifeless except for the red strobes flashing along its hull. Emergency bulkheads had deployed around the dock. Station security officers were setting up containment barriers and rerouting traffic. The air tasted faintly of burned ozone and overheated systems. Corbin spotted her and gestured sharply. Thras stood beside him, issuing orders to his security team in a low growl. "What happened?" Sarah asked, tightening her grip on the duffel. The Starwood Venture suffered a cascade failure in its main reactor's cooling loop during final approach, Corbin said. Safety interlocks engaged, but the core's containment field is unstable. If it breaches while docked, he didn't finish. He didn't have to. Why not release the clamps and push the ship away from the station? Sarah demanded, scanning the readouts hovering above the bay. Docking clamps are hard-locked when the system detects reactor instability, Thras said. Prevents a damaged vessel from drifting into populated sectors. And their propulsion is offline. Same failure chain. Station engineering? She asked. Tied up dealing with a life support issue on the habitat ring, Corbin said grimly. 3 residential sectors. They cannot spare anyone. He looked directly at her. The ship's crew reports their engineer is unconscious. They've run standard emergency procedures. It is not enough. Sarah stared at the ship. She could almost hear Emily's voice in her head. No one else is coming. So you either move, or you let them die. What kind of reactor? She asked. Tellurin Mark 7, Corbin replied. An older design, but reliable. In theory. She exhaled slowly. I train on simulations of that model. The human versions, at least. I'll need a radiation suit and remote diagnostics. And someone on the ship who can follow instructions. Thra nodded once and gestured to a nearby officer. Get her a suit. Full shielding, latest model. Morgan, Corbin said quietly, catching her eye. If you go in there, understand, this is not a maintenance delay. If you misjudge. I know, she said. But if no one goes, we already know how this ends. 20 minutes later, sealed inside a bulky protective suit that made her feel like she was walking through syrup, Sarah stood in the airlock connecting Nexus Station to the Starwood Venture. Emergency lighting bathed the corridor beyond in harsh red. The ship's captain, Javix, spoke in her comm link, his Tauran accent clipped with strain. Core temperature continues to rise, he reported. We've diverted maximum power to emergency cooling, but it only slows the increase. What was the last thing your engineer said before he went down? Sarah asked. Her suit's helmet display scrolled reactor telemetry data in one corner of her vision. He detected harmonic disturbances in the containment field, Javix said. He was attempting recalibration when a surge knocked him unconscious. He's in medbay now. The inner door cycled open. A Novarian crew member waited there, translucent skin pulsing rapidly with stress circulation. Engineering is this way, he said, voice a little too high. The reactor is not happy. They hurried through tight corridors that vibrated with the uneven pulse of an overstressed core. The closer they got to engineering, the hotter the air felt, even through Sarah's suit. Inside the reactor room, displays screamed warnings in 3 languages. The containment field readings spiked and dipped erratically. Sarah stepped up to the main console. "All right," she muttered. "Show me what you've done to yourself." Even through Sarah's protective suit, she felt the oppressive heat radiating from the reactor bulkhead. Warning glyphs danced across the overhead displays, each one escalating in severity. Containment fluctuations, harmonic destabilization, coolant cycle degradation, rising radiation. The Novarian beside her wrung his translucent hands. "We tried stabilizing the loop," he said, his voice trembling. "But the field keeps quivering." Sarah scanned the data streaming across her helmet display. The containment waveform pulsed like a heartbeat under stress, its rhythm faltering. It wasn't failing evenly. Sections of the field were thinning in irregular patches, like something was poking at the reactor's frequencies from the outside. "What caused the initial surge?" Sarah asked. "A spike when we entered docking alignment," the Novarian said. "We thought it was ambient radiation from station shields." Clearly it wasn't. Sarah's gaze drifted to the reactor cross-section diagram. The containment generators were trembling, their harmonics off by a degree that shouldn't have been possible unless something nearby was emitting a counterfield. "Morgan to Captain Javix," she said. "Did you load any exotic cargo on our last stop?" Silence. "Then, we took on a shipment of Zuran quantum crystals," he admitted, sounding embarrassed. "They're in a shielded storage unit on Bay Deck 3. Sarah shut her eyes briefly. Quantum crystals. Rare, powerful, unpredictable. They generated complex electromagnetic signatures when agitated, signatures that could create interference pulses in any sensitive system, including a Telluran Mark 7 reactor. "I need to know about that shielding," Sarah said. "What grade is it?" "Standard containment," Javix said. "High grade by merchant standards." "Not high enough," Sarah muttered. She turned to the Novarian. "I need someone monitoring reaction stability while I adjust the field generators." I can do that." He swallowed, throat glowing faintly with stress. "Good. I'm going into the crawl space." She gestured toward the narrow access hatch that curved around the base of the core. "Manual harmonic modulators in there." The Novarian went pale, literally. His whole body dullened. "But the radiation—" "My suit will hold for 20 minutes, she said. "After that—" "Well, we're not going to talk about after that, okay?" He nodded weakly and positioned himself at the console. Sarah crouched and crawled into the maintenance shaft. Her suit beeped the moment she crossed the threshold. "Warning, radiation levels exceed safe limits." Time remaining, 19:59. The crawlspace was barely wide enough for her shoulders. Metal groaned around her as the ship shifted under the strain of unstable gravity and fluctuating field pressure. Heat radiated through the suit in waves, each one hotter than the last. Her breathing grew loud inside the helmet, the only steady sound in the smothering tunnel. "You've got this," she whispered to herself. "Find the generator, tune the harmonics, stabilize the field. And don't think about your sister crawling into a damaged reactor chamber the day she died." Her helmet's lights reflected off the curved metal walls. Sweat trickled down her spine despite the cooling weave in the suit. She rounded a bend and found the access console for the modulator. It was vibrating, not physically. The air around it shimmered faintly. The containment field was fluctuating so wildly that even here, at the maintenance access point, interference buzzed invisible ripples. Sarah connected her diagnostic tool. "Novarian status?" "Field integrity at 47% and dropping," he replied, voice taut. "The crystals must be destabilizing faster than expected." "Captain Javix," Sarah snapped. "Get someone to reinforce that cargo shielding. Wrap it in anything with high-density field dampening. I don't care if it's emergency plating or spare hull shielding move." Javix's voice returned instantly. "Already on it. Deck crew is en route." Sarah swallowed hard and began tuning the harmonic modulators. Her hands moved quickly but precisely, adjusting the phase frequencies in tiny increments. The slightest misalignment could rip the field apart. Her suit beeped again. Time remaining, 1440. The heat worsened. Her vision blurred at the edges. She thought of Emily again, not the decorated captain, not the legend. Emily in their parents' garage, teaching a 12-year-old Sarah how to dismantle a power cell. You want to survive? Know your systems. Know your tools. Know yourself. And then she'd ruffled Sarah's hair and said, "You're smarter than you think, kid. You're going to save people someday." The crawl space trembled violently. The field graph spiked red. "Containment breach imminent," the Novarian cried. "Not today," Sarah hissed. She locked the stabilizers into manual override and forced the harmonics into a compensatory pattern. The waveform on her display steadied barely. "Tie the modulator to emergency power," she said. "Now." The Novarian transferred control with shaking hands. The core's stabilizing waveform flickered, then caught, then slowly began to rise towards safer levels. "Containment at 62%, he reported. 65, temperature dropping 2 degrees per minute. Sarah sagged against the tunnel wall. The field was stabilizing. She'd bought them time. "Okay," she said, voice trembling. "I'm coming out." The reverse crawl felt twice as long. Her muscles ached. Her vision pulsed. Heat pressed in her bones. Her suit shrieked warnings. "Time remaining, 320. "Hurry, Morgan," the Novarian urged. "Radiation in the tunnel is still increasing." "Doing my best," she rasped, dragging herself forward. She reached the hatch, and hands seized her arms. 2 crew members hauled her out onto the deck before she collapsed on her knees. Her suit's cooling system flickered, struggling to compensate. The Novarian shouted from the console, "Containment at 81% and holding. We're safe." Cheers erupted throughout engineering. Sarah barely heard them. A wave of nausea hit her, followed by a surge of weakness in her limbs. The room spun. Someone was speaking to her. Captain Javix, she thought, but his words swam in and out like distorted echoes. "You saved my crew, my ship, Nexus O's." Her suit alarm blared one final warning, then fell silent. The last thing she remembered was 2 sets of arms lifting her and the metallic scent of overheated air fading into nothingness. She woke to white light, not the harsh red emergency glow of a failing reactor, but the soft, cool illumination of a medical bay. Her body felt heavy, like gravity itself had tripled. "You are awake," said a melodic voice. A Meridian healer stood beside her, pale lavender skin shimmering with internal bioluminescence. Her expression was gentle but firm. "Do not attempt to rise. Your cells are still repairing radiation stress." Sarah blinked slowly. "How bad?" "You received a dose that would have incapacitated most species," the healer said. "But humans are notoriously resilient. Treatment is ongoing. Rest." Sarah glanced at her arm. A translucent infusion device pulsed with pale blue anti-radiation serum. She took a slow breath. "How long was I out?" "Approximately 14 hours. Sarah tried to sit, but dizziness forced her back. The Meridian guided her into a reclined position. "Your supervisor has been informed. You're not expected to work during recovery." Sarah gave a weak laugh. "Corbin must be thrilled." "On the contrary," the healer said with delicate amusement. "He has visited twice." Before Sarah could process that, the door slid open with a soft hiss. Corbin entered first, followed by Thra. Behind them came a distinguished older man, human, silver-haired, wearing a tailored suit that screamed authority. And behind him, 3 Croins, high-ranking ones. Sarah's stomach lurched with alarm, but Corbin lifted a hand. "Relax. This is not a threat." The silver-haired man stepped forward. "Ms. Morgan," he said warmly, "allow me to introduce myself. I am Director Conrad Verne, Regional Operations Overseer for Stellar Freight in this sector. I arrived this morning to meet the technician who prevented a catastrophe." Sarah stared. "Director? You crossed systems for me. You shielded an entire dock from destruction," Verne said. "You saved dozens of lives. That merits attention." Thrawn nodded solemnly. Even I have never seen someone crawl into a failing reactor while conscious of the risks. You did more than your duty. Before Sarah could respond, one of the Croynes stepped forward, a female with deep crimson markings and armor bearing the seal of the Croyne Diplomatic Corps. Technician Sarah Morgan, she said, translator beads rendering her sharp voice smooth. I am Commander Vex, emissary of the Croyne delegation. I am here to acknowledge a debt. Sarah blinked. A debt? The location of our diplomatic residential ring, Vex said evenly, was within the blast radius of a potential reactor breach. Your intervention preserved many Croyne lives. Sarah struggled for words. I didn't know. Intention is irrelevant, Vex said. Action defines honor. You have demonstrated strength worthy of respect. The other Croynes bowed, a gesture rare to give to non-Croynes. Sarah stared at them, stunned. When the Croyne delegation left, the room felt too quiet. Director Vern cleared his throat. Morgan, I did not merely come to thank you. I came to offer you a position. Corbin stepped closer. A significant one. Vern smiled. Sarah Morgan, how would you feel about becoming the new Chief Technical Officer for Stellar Freight's Nexus operations? The world seemed to tilt again. Not from radiation this time. From shock. Sir, she whispered, I've been here 2 months. And in those 2 months, Vern said, you've solved problems our senior engineers struggled with for years. You prevented the loss of a vessel. You earned a commendation from Croyne diplomats. And you have demonstrated an instinct for leadership, even under lethal pressure. Sarah shook her head faintly. There must be someone more qualified. Experience is valuable, Vern admitted. But so is talent. So is courage. So is the ability to adapt. Throff folded his arms. You have that ability. Corbin nodded. And Stellar Freight would be fortunate to have such a mind in charge. Sarah's chest tightened. Emily's uniform flashed through her memory. Emily who led fleets. Emily who fought battles. Emily who became a legend by dying for the cause. Sarah had never wanted to be that, but she had saved a station. With tools, not torpedoes. May I think about it? She asked quietly. Of course, Vern said. Take time to recover. Then give us your answer. The 3 men left, and the Meridian healer resumed, adjusting her treatment. Sarah lay back, staring at the ceiling. She wasn't Emily, and for the first time, that felt like a strength, not a failure. If you're still here with me, don't forget to hit like and drop "still listening" in the comments so we know who the real ones are. The next 2 days slid by in a blur of treatments and half sleep. The Meridian healer adjusted Sarah's infusion levels, ran scans, and lectured her gently every time she tried to swing her legs off the bed. Radiation-chewed cells knit themselves back together 10,000 at a time while she watched the medical bay ceiling and tried not to overthink her life. Director Vern's offer replayed in her head like a loop. Chief Technical Officer for Nexus Operations. CTO. After 8 weeks on station. Part of her wanted to laugh. Another part wanted to run. You came out here to disappear, she thought. Not to plaster your last name across every ship registry and personnel report in the sector. On the 3rd morning, the healer finally disconnected the infusion device. Your blood work is stabilizing, the Meridian said, her luminous eyes approving. You will feel tired for several days. No heavy exposure to radiation. No heroic reactor crawls. Understood. Understood, Sarah said. Good, the healer replied. You're discharged as of this cycle. Return to light duty tomorrow if your employer insists. I suggest at least 1 more day of rest. Rest, right? Sarah walked back to her quarters slowly, the corridors feeling both familiar and strange after being confined to one bed. Her body felt like she'd done 3 days of combat training without a break. Her brain felt worse. Her room door slid open at her ID ping. The quarters were small, a narrow bed, a fold-down desk, a storage unit, a tiny wash stall. Every surface was clean, functional, unadorned, except for one. The storage shelf where she kept Emily's uniform. Sarah reached in and drew the dark blue fabric out carefully, laying it across her bed. The lighting in the room caught the embroidered Earth and Branches emblem, making it glimmer softly. She traced the captain's insignia on the collar with one finger. Emily had worn this uniform onto the Indomitable's bridge on the day she rammed a Croyn flagship, sacrificing herself and most of her crew to break the invasion. When Sarah closed her eyes, she could still see the hollow of her sister that the news feeds had replayed endlessly, jaws set, eyes steady, issuing final orders with calm determination. The galaxy had turned her into a legend. Sarah had spent 3 years trying to be anything else. "What would you tell me to do?" she whispered to the empty room, voice barely audible. Emily, of course, didn't answer. But the more Sarah stared at the uniform, the more something shifted in her mind. She realized that for years she'd been asking herself the wrong question. She'd always thought in terms of what would Emily do. Charge forward. Take command. Seize the hardest option. But Emily's life had been built around guns and formation charts and risk assessments in battle. Sarah's was built around schematics, waveforms, and stubborn problem solving. What if I stopped trying to copy her path, she thought, and started asking what she'd tell me to do on mine? Emily had never wanted a clone. She'd wanted a sister who lived. "You'd yell at me if I turned this down, just because I was scared of the attention, wouldn't you?" Sarah said softly. In her mind's ear, she heard Emily's dry voice. "If you're good at something and it helps people, quit hiding and go do it, dummy." It made her snort despite herself. A chime at her door startled her. "Who is it?" she called. "Thra," came the deep reply. Sarah folded the uniform quickly and slipped it back onto the shelf before opening the door. The Draren nearly filled the doorway, scales catching the corridor lighting. He glanced her over, taking in the slight tremor in her stance, the pale edges around her eyes. "You are upright," he observed. "Good sign. Still feel like I lost a wrestling match with a fusion furnace," she said, stepping aside. "Come in." He ducked his head to clear the frame and stepped into the tiny room. Standing inside made him look even bigger. "Let me guess," Sarah said. "Corbin sent you to make sure I'm not dead." "This visit is unofficial," Thra said. "Corbin concerns himself with schedules. I am concerned with something else." She raised an eyebrow. "Which is?" "Your decision." "Ah, of course. Word travels fast," she said. "This is Nexus Station," he rumbled. "Information circulates faster than air through the ducts. Half the docs already know you were offered the CTO post. The other half will pretend they knew first." She sank onto the edge of her bed. "You think it's a bad idea?" "I think you are considering refusing," Thra replied, leaning against the wall with surprising gentleness for his bulk. "Not because you cannot do the job, but because you do not wish to be seen." "That obvious?" she muttered. He tapped one heavy claw against his forearm guard, what she'd come to recognize as his equivalent of a thoughtful frown. "I know the look of someone standing in another shadow," he said. She glanced up, curious despite herself. "You?" "Yes." His deep voice softened. "Before I joined Stellar Freight, I served in the Draren Planetary Forces. My sire was a celebrated war chief in the conflict with the Terrans. His campaigns are still studied in academies." Sarah remembered reading about that war. Brutal sieges, scorched ground, too many dead. "Everyone expected you to become him," she guessed. "Better," Frost said simply. "They expected me to surpass his record, to win more battles, to carry more trophies. When I chose a security commission on a trade route instead of frontline command, some called it cowardice. Others called it a waste." He shrugged, scales rasping softly. "But I saw what the war did to my sire. Victory does not erase the weight of every life you spend to earn it. I decided I would rather prevent deaths than chase glory." Sarah stared at him. "Do you regret it?" "No," he said, unhesitating. "I still fight. I still protect. I simply chose a different battlefield, one that lets me sleep without counting ghosts." He inclined his head toward her. "You are doing something similar, Morgan. Your sister chose a warrior's path. You have chosen systems and repairs. Different choices, not lesser." "You know about her," Sarah said quietly. "The Alliance briefings on human history after the Proxima incident were thorough," Thra said. "The name Morgan is not uncommon, but your file plus your age and origin, it was not difficult to connect." Sarah chewed on that. "Everyone always does eventually. And you resent it. Wouldn't you?" she snapped, more sharply than she'd intended. "Walk into a room, and have people treat you like a reflection instead of an actual person? Thra's golden eyes regarded her steadily. Yes, he said. I did. For a long time. He shifted closer, his voice dropping. But hear this. Shadows do not last forever. Step into your own light long enough, and even the most stubborn will eventually see you first. Sarah looked away, blinking fast. That promotion, Thra continued, is not a favor to your sister's memory. It is a result of your actions. Those crew members on the Starwood Venture do not chant Captain Emily Morgan's name when they speak of who pulled them back from annihilation. They speak of Sarah, the human technician who crawled into a dying reactor. His words landed like small impacts, one after another. So, he said, straightening, decide based on what you want, not on fear of being misjudged. Fear is a poor architect for a life. Silence settled between them. Sarah stared at her hands, at the faint, lingering redness where the radiation had first started to bite, at the calluses from tools and panel edges. You think I can do it, she said. I've seen you talk back to malfunctioning gravity generators with more courage than some officers show in combat, Thra replied dryly. Yes, I think you can do it. To her surprise, Sarah laughed. The sound surprised her even more. Thra moved toward the door, pausing with his hand on the panel. Whatever you choose, he said, ensure you can look in a mirror afterward and say, this was my decision. Not Emily's. Not Vern's. Yours. He left without waiting for an answer. The door slid shut with a soft whoosh. Sarah sat there a long time. Finally, she stood, opened the storage shelf again, and took out Emily's uniform. She held it up, letting the fabric fall open, the captain's rank glinting under the room's lights. This was yours, she said quietly. You wore into battles I can barely imagine. You made your choices, and I respect them. She folded the uniform carefully and set it back on the shelf. But this, she looked down at her own clothes, at the scattered tools on her desk, at the half-finished notes she'd made for improving station maintenance cycles. This is mine. It was like a knot in her chest finally loosened. For the first time, she could honor Emily without trying to be Emily. And with that realization, the decision clicked into place. She walked over to her console, pinged Director Vern's contact code, and recorded a short, steady message. Director Vern, this is Technician Sarah Morgan. I've considered your offer. If it still stands, I'm accepting the position of Chief Technical Officer for Stellar Freight Nexus Operations. I'll report to Corbin in the morning for transition planning. She sent the message before she could talk herself out of it. Then she sat back, heart racing, but under the nerves was something else. Anticipation. 1 week later, the operations center felt like a different world. Stellar Freight's main hub on Nexus took up a full level. A central control room ringed by status displays, dispatch consoles, cargo routing interfaces, and system health dashboards. Technicians from half a dozen species moved between stations, voices overlapping quietly as ships checked in and out. Sarah stood on the upper walkway, looking down over it all. The title still felt new in her head. Chief Technical Officer Morgan. Her responsibilities had multiplied overnight. Now she supervised every maintenance schedule, approved repair protocols, and signed off on diagnostic priorities. Her team of specialists ranged from grizzled human techs to meticulous Turon system engineers and a pair of Venturi sensor experts who argued constantly but produced brilliant results. Her office, a small glass-walled room overlooking the operations floor, held her personal console, 2 wall displays that tracked key metrics, and a plant from some outer rim world that someone had left there with a note that read, for oxygen. Don't kill it. She'd already implemented 3 changes. First, she rewrote the emergency response procedures to better account for cross-species tech interactions, including case studies on gravity, magnetic interference, and reactor, cargo field resonance. She even added an anonymized section about the Starwood Venture incident. Second, she set up a rotating series of training sessions focused on why this system fails instead of just follow the manual. She made every tech walk through at least one failure chain from cause to cascade. Third, she established a rule. If someone said that's not my department during an emergency, they had to attend extra cross-systems training. Word of her appointment had, predictably, set tongues wagging. Some people looked at her with newfound respect. Others eyed her with suspicion, waiting to see if she would crack. A few made pointed comments about promotions earned because of names. Those comments stopped after she demolished a stubborn power distribution bug that had been causing minor outages for months. She found a root cause in 3 hours and rolled out a fix in 12. People noticed results. As for the Croins, their behavior toward her changed in ways she still found unsettling. Commander Vex's commendation had gone into her official file and been forwarded to Stellar Freight's headquarters. More importantly, it had gone back to Croin space, where word spread. The rank-and-file Croin on Nexus now gave Sarah a formal nod when they passed her in the corridors. A few even intoned Morgan in a way that sounded not unlike the way they addressed their own honored warriors. She tried not to think about the 3 young bullies from the corridor on her first day. Some lessons didn't need repetition. One morning, as she was reviewing a list of pending refits, her console pinged with an incoming message flagged priority from Director Vern. She opened it. Vern's holographic image appeared above her desk, recorded in an office that definitely wasn't on Nexus. "Morgan," he said, and there was a note of satisfaction in his voice she hadn't heard before. "I hope the new role suits you. I've received glowing reports from Corbin and positive feedback from station authorities." He glanced down as if at a datapad. "I'm reaching out because another party has taken an interest in your work. Specifically, the Earth Ambassador's office on the Concord capital." Sarah's heart skipped. "The ambassador has heard of your actions aboard the Starwood Venture, your commendation from the Croin delegation, and your success in coordinating multi-species technical teams on Nexus," Vern continued. "They're assembling a liaison for the Concord Technical Exchange Initiative, a human representative who can navigate both engineering and politics." He met her gaze through the projection. "They asked if I knew any candidate who fit that description. I gave them your name." For a heartbeat, the hum of the operations center seemed to fade. The Concord Technical Exchange. That program was the dream of every young engineer back on Earth. Labs shared between species, joint research into new energy sources, field trials of cutting-edge systems. It was the opposite of what Emily had done. Where her sister had carved respect through battle, the exchange carved respect through cooperation. The position would mean splitting your time between Nexus and the capital, Vern said. It would raise your profile, yes. It would also give you a chance to influence how the Concord sees human expertise beyond war stories. He smiled faintly. Stellar Freight would hate to lose you full-time, but some opportunities are larger than any single company. I won't stand in your way if you decide to pursue this. The message ended, leaving Sarah alone with her reflection in the desk screen. For a long moment, she simply stared. "I wanted to get away from all of this," she muttered. "From expectations, from politics, from everything." And yet here she was. Not because she'd chased fame, because she'd done her job when it mattered. She looked out over the operations floor again. Technicians moved efficiently. Monitors glowed with steady readings. Comm channels crackled as freighters reported in. A maintenance alert blinked in the corner of her display. Gravity variance on level 42 again. Nothing critical, but worth watching. She smiled. There would always be work to do. Systems to fix. People to protect. Emily had shown the galaxy one face of humanity, the side that went down fighting. Maybe it was time for Sarah to show them another. The side that kept things running, prevented disasters, and found solutions no one else could see. Different uniform. Same species. Same stubborn refusal to back down. She tapped a quick instruction to her team about the level 42 alert, then opened a fresh message window addressed to Director Vern's office. "Director," she began, "about that ambassador's inquiry. If you're still listening at this point, type EDC versus CTO in the comments, so I know you got all the way through part 4. When you're ready, I can give you part 5, Sarah's next big choice, what she does about the ambassador's offer, and how she finally steps fully into her own legend." Sarah didn't answer Director Vern's message right away. Instead, she did what she always did when the universe dropped something enormous in her lap. She went to work. There was a gravity alert on level 42, after all. Not an emergency this time, more like a quiet complaint in the background systems. Minor fluctuations that hadn't tripped any major alarms yet. The kind of thing a lazy tech might have ignored for a day or two. Sarah grabbed her toolkit. "Where are you heading?" asked Jairo, a human junior tech, as she passed his workstation. "Level 42, she said. Our old friend, the gravity regulator, is asking for attention again." He winced. "The one that tried to toss cargo across the bay last cycle?" "The very same." She slung the duffel over her shoulder. "Run the ops board while I'm gone. If a ship screams, I want to know about it when I get back." "Yes, Chief," he said, already turning to his console. The title still made her twitch. Part of her wondered if it ever wouldn't. The ride down in the lift felt oddly nostalgic. The first time she'd come here, she'd been a new hire, worried about impressing a supervisor. Today she stepped off as the person responsible for an entire technical network. The storage bay door opened on familiar chaos. Cargo stacks, forklifts, and the subtle hum of the recently relocated magnetic containment unit. After the incident weeks ago, Thra had made sure the Venturi merchant's precious quantum toys were moved to a different section, well clear of any gravity regulators. The regulator itself hummed steadily, but the diagnostic panel showed tiny, creeping variations. Sarah popped it open, found a misaligned sensor array, and corrected it. Nothing dramatic. No radiation. No near-death experiences. Just the quiet, satisfying work of keeping things sound. "This is who I am too," she thought as she calibrated the last setting. Not just the girl who crawled into a reactor. When she returned to operations an hour later, a message icon pulsed persistently on her console. She sat down, opened a new recording window, and stared at her own reflection for a long second. Her face looked different than it had when she'd first arrived on Nexus. Not older exactly, but more defined. The uncertainty in her eyes had been replaced by something steadier. She hit record. "Director Verne," she said, her voice steady. "I've received your message about the ambassador's interest in me for the Concord Technical Exchange liaison role." She exhaled slowly. "I came to Nexus Station to get away from the expectations attached to my family name. I didn't want to live in Emily's shadow or spend my life fielding questions about her last battle. I wanted to build something that was mine. For a while, I thought that meant staying small, invisible, unimportant." She glanced through the glass wall at the operations floor. "I was wrong," she continued. "I've realized that building my own path doesn't mean hiding from opportunity. It means choosing the opportunities that fit who I am, not who people think I should be." Her fingers tapped gently on the desk. "I can't deny what this liaison position could mean," she said. "For human engineers. For our reputation beyond the Earth Defense Corps. We've proven we can fight. Maybe it's time we prove we can build just as well." She smiled faintly. "I'm interested. I'd like to discuss what a shared appointment might look like, splitting time between Nexus and the capital, as you suggested. I won't abandon my responsibilities here lightly. But if there's a way to serve both Stellar Freight and the wider human-Concord relationship, I want to explore it." She hesitated, then added, "Tell the ambassador this. I'm not Captain Emily Morgan. I'm not a soldier. I won't pretend to be. What I can offer is something different. An understanding of how mixed-tech systems actually work in the field, and a stubborn refusal to accept impossible as an answer when lives are at stake." She ended the recording and sent it before she could second-guess herself. Then she sat back, heart thrumming. There was nothing left to do but wait for the universe to reply. The universe answered faster than she expected. 3 days later, the Earth Ambassador's office requested a live holocall. Sarah stood alone in her office as the projection activated. The figure that coalesced over her desk was a middle-aged woman with dark hair, pulled back in a simple knot, and a pin on her lapel bearing both the Earth emblem and the Concord crest. "Ms. Morgan," the ambassador said, her voice calm and precise. "Thank you for making time." "Of course, Ambassador," Sarah replied. "And please, it's just Sarah." The ambassador's lips quirked faintly. "Only if you call me Imani." "Yes, ma'am. I mean Imani." "That's a good start," Imani said. "I've reviewed your records, Sarah. Your work here has attracted attention in places beyond trade manifests and maintenance logs." Sarah suppressed a nervous swallow. I get the feeling that's not entirely a compliment. On the contrary, Imani said, I'm always searching for people who make themselves useful without being asked. You did that on Nexus. She folded her hands. The technical exchange program is more than a scholarship for bright minds, she explained. It's where the Concord's most ambitious engineers, researchers, and system designers test ideas together. Break old assumptions. Sometimes break things, frankly, and learn from it. There was a glint in her eye that said she wasn't romanticizing it. Up to now, Imani went on, most human representation has been limited to observers or short-term specialists. Our reputation still leans heavily on your sister's legacy and the Earth Defense Corps' performance. They respect us as fighters. She shrugged. But culturally, that could be a double-edged sword. We want them to see more. Builders, Sarah said softly. Techs. The ones who fix the leaks before ships go under. Exactly. Imani smiled. We want a liaison who understands human tech and non-human tech. Someone who can sit in a room with Dreher and Shield engineers, Venturi containment designers, Tehran energy theorists, and ask the right questions. Someone who knows what actually goes wrong in the field instead of just reading simulations. She gave Sarah a look that was both assessing and warm. Director Verne speaks extremely highly of you, she said. So does Commander Vex, which is frankly astonishing. And we have the logs from his Starwood Venture incident. Sarah shifted, uncomfortable. That was a team effort. I just did my part. Heroes always say that, Imani murmured, whether they're pointing guns or holding wrenches. She let that sit for a moment. Before you answer, the ambassador said, I want to be clear. This role will make you more visible than you are now. Your name will appear in diplomatic briefs. You will stand in rooms where you're introduced first as liaison and only second as engineer. You will be asked your opinion on matters that cross from circuitry into politics. It's not a quiet life. Sarah thought of the little bunk room she'd first arrived in, tucked away deep in Nexus, where no one knew or cared who she was. Of slipping through crowds invisible. Of Emily, who had never once chosen the quiet option. It doesn't sound quiet, Sarah agreed. But it sounds like it matters. It will, Imani said. So the question is, does that fit the path you're building for yourself? The answer rose before she could stop it. Yes, she said, but I won't leave Nexus hanging. If I accept, I want it structured as a shared appointment. I stay on as CTO here. With a strong deputy, I can train up to handle day-to-day operations when I'm away. I don't want to be some distant name in a registry. I want to keep my hands on real systems, real problems. Imani's expression softened into something like approval. I had a feeling you'd say that, she replied. And Nexus appealed for exactly such an arrangement. It seems you've made yourself difficult to replace. Sarah tried not to grin. What about? She hesitated. What about the obvious comparison? Imani's gaze sharpened. Your sister? Sarah nodded. Imani's answer was simple. Emily Morgan has her place in the history archives, she said. You are writing something different. When I present your candidacy, I will acknowledge the family connection once, and then focus entirely on your record. If anyone tries to reduce you to Captain Morgan's little sister in my presence, I'll correct them. Something tight and brittle inside, Sarah finally cracked. Then yes, she said, I'd like to accept. The ambassador's smile was genuine now. Welcome to a bigger stage, Sarah. The exchange is about to learn what a human maintenance technician can do. The call ended. Sarah stood in the quiet office for a long moment, hands braced on the desk. Then she laughed, short, shocked, and unexpectedly light. News spread, of course. Jero nearly dropped his datapad when he heard. The Tehran engineers congratulated her with formal bows. The Venturi sensor pair chittered excitedly and immediately began arguing over who would get to borrow her insights first. Corbin simply nodded once and said, I will require a complete documentation pass on your workflow before you start splitting your time, Morgan. Which, in Corbin speak, meant I'm proud of you. Thra clapped a massive hand on her shoulder so hard she nearly stumbled. Good, he said with satisfaction. Now when you terrify diplomats, you can do it with official authorization. Even some of the Croin crew approach her in the corridors, offering stiff acknowledgments. One of them, A young male with shallow scar lines who looked uncomfortably familiar actually stopped her. "You are Morgan," he said, voice awkward. "The reactor fixer." "Among other things," she replied. He shifted, clearly painfully aware of himself. "I was on level 20 that day," he said. "I heard the rumors. I heard you put yourself in danger to save the dock, including us." He swallowed. "I wish to say gratitude." Sarah studied him. She wondered, briefly, if he'd been one of the three who'd cornered her that first cycle. His markings weren't quite the same. But the age, the posture, it was possible. In the end, it didn't matter. "You're welcome," she said. "Try not to blow up any reactors while I'm gone, okay? I'd like Nexus to still be here when I get back." His jaw clicked in what might have been a nervous laugh. "We will try." Life on Nexus adjusted to the idea of Sarah Morgan splitting her time between the smoky guts of freight systems and the polished halls of the Concord capital. She spent the next month training up a deputy CTO, a meticulous Turon named Hallen who could quote regulation codes from memory. She documented every process that lived only in her head, from how to read Adrarin's expression when they're 3 seconds from hitting someone to which circuits on level 19 lie, even though the schematics insist otherwise. Her first scheduled trip to the capital approached faster than she expected. On the night before she was set to leave, she returned to her quarters and found herself standing once again in front of the storage shelf. The Earth Defense Corps uniform waited exactly where she'd left it. Sarah took it out and laid it on the bed. In the beginning, she'd kept the garment as a wound, something to remind her of what had been taken. Later, she'd clung to it like a shield, an object that could scare off hostile aliens. Now, as she smoothed the fabric, it felt like something else. An heirloom, a piece of history, but not a script she had to follow. She sat down beside it and spoke aloud, feeling faintly ridiculous and not caring. "So," she said quietly, "the liaison thing is happening. You'd probably make some joke about me finally getting dragged into the big leagues." Her eyes stung. "I'm not you," she went on. "I'm not going to ram warships or shout battle orders. I'm going to sit in 2 bright rooms with engineers and ambassadors and argue about field harmonics and safety protocols. I'm going to convince people that humans aren't just good at fighting. We're good at thinking." She hooked a thumb at the emblem. "You showed them we could stand our ground," she said. "I'll show them we can stand alongside them." Silence answered. And yet, for the first time, that silence felt companionable. She folded the uniform gently and slid it back into the shelf. The next day, she left Nexus Station for the capital in a small, sleek shuttle with the Stellar Freight logo on one side and the Earth emblem on the other. As the station shrank in the viewport, she thought of every cramped duct she'd crawled through, every bulky system she'd coaxed back to life, every small victory that no one outside a maintenance log ever saw. Now, those invisible skills were her calling card. At the Concord capital, the technical exchange complex sprawled like a glittering hive of ideas. Labs, test bays, and collaborative chambers where species that had once met only on battlefields now bickered over circuit designs instead of territories. On her first day, a Adrarin shield architect handed her a series of schematics and asked her bluntly, "Can humans keep up with this?" Sarah grinned. "Watch me," she said, and started redesigning his failsafes. She spent her weeks there cross-indexing field data from Nexus with lab conditions, pointing out failures no one had thought to simulate, and learning more in a day than she had in months of classroom training back on Earth. When she returned to Nexus, the station greeted her like a living thing. Lights flickering, hull vibrating, calm traffic buzzing. She rolled her shoulders, grabbed her tools, and headed straight for a flag compressor anomaly on level 22. This was her rhythm now. High-level meetings and low-level conduits. Diplomatic briefings and coolant leaks. Liaison reports and busted valves. 2 worlds. 1 path. Her own. Months later, in a quiet moment between crises, Sarah stood in the operations center watching a cargo ship detach cleanly from its docking clamps. A junior tech approached her. "Chief," they said, "we've got a new batch of recruits starting next cycle. Corbin wants someone to give them the welcome to Nexus talk. He suggested you." She snorted. "Of course he did. When the cycle came, she stood before a small group of fresh-faced technicians. Human, Turon, Draren, Venturi, Novarian. Some were nervous, others cocky. They'd all heard rumors of her by now. "This station will break you," she said mildly, watching their eyes widen. "If you let it. It's old. It's complicated. It's pointless to pretend otherwise." She let the tension sit, then smiled. "But if you learn its rhythms," she went on, "if you listen to it, if you respect every circuit instead of assuming the manual knows everything, you'll do more good here than most soldiers ever see on a battlefield." One of the humans raised a hand. "Is it true you crawled into a failing reactor core?" Sarah sighed theatrically. "You sprint toward one exploding ship one time, and no one ever lets you forget it." They laughed. "Here's what matters," she said, sobering. "When the alarms start blaring and everyone else is running away from the problem, your job is to go toward it. Carefully, with a plan, with knowledge." She tapped her chest. "With this," she said, "not with weapons, with brains." She thought of Emily then, for just a heartbeat, of a warship at Proxima and a freighter on Nexus, of two sisters who would never share a room again, but who had both, in their own ways, refused to step aside when others needed them. "Humans have a reputation now," she told the recruits. "Some of that is because of battles fought before you were born. The rest? That's on us. Every system we stabilize, every disaster we prevent, every time we show the Concord that we're more than anyone expected." She shrugged. "Welcome to the job," she said. "It's messy, it's dangerous, and if you do it right, most people will never know your name." A pause. "But sometimes," she added, "they do. And when they do, make sure it's because you showed them the best of what you and your species can be." The recruits dispersed, buzzing with nervous excitement. Sarah returned to her console, where an alert about a minor coolant imbalance waited. She started reviewing the data, mind already shifting gears. On a shelf, in her quarters, the Earth Defense Corps uniform rested quietly. It didn't define her. It didn't have to. On Nexus Station, and in the Capital's labs, and in the quiet, humming bones of 100 ships, people spoke now of someone else. Not as Captain Morgan's little sister. As Sarah Morgan, the human who kept things from blowing up, who crawled into danger armed only with a toolkit, and who showed a galaxy full of species that humanity's real superpower wasn't just how hard they could hit, but how hard they could think when it mattered.